Apparently, in India, a wave of false accusations is resulting in what they're calling the hashtag MenToo movement. I have two stories. This is really weird. This was posted on Reddit on the news section, and there's a lot of criticism of it because people are saying, should there be a MenToo movement at all? Because Me Too can't include them. We saw, I'm forgetting the actor's name. Wow, I feel really bad. Terry Crews. Terry Crews came out and he made some accusations. So Me Too can absolutely be about men. There doesn't need to be a MenToo movement, add a little N to it. But this is specifically about the right of anonymity. If you're accused, should you have the right to remain anonymous? And I think this extends beyond just these particular crimes to any crime. If you're accused of a crime, should your name be plastered all over the press? Maybe not. Maybe unless you're convicted, you should have a right to anonymity. So there's two stories here with different people in India, and there's a lot to talk about with India because India has serious problems. But before we do that, make sure you check out timcast.com/donate. If you'd like to support my work, I really do rely on your guys' assistance. There's a monthly donation option, cryptocurrency, physical address, but of course you can always just share this video, click that like button. Apparently clicking the like button really does boost you in the algorithm, so that's very, helpful if you don't want to do anything else. Or you know what, do nothing at all. You have no obligations. I appreciate any support. Well, let's check this out. So this is from the Times of India. India, as you know, has a seriously screwed up history with, assault and things like this. But they still bring up the question about MenToo. So let's read this. From Mumbai, they say, MenToo movement. Is it time for debate on anonymity of the accused, like in Ireland? Ask activist's lawyer. In the Republic of Ireland, the accused can remain anonymous until the trial is over. And even then, unless convicted, and the identification wouldn't endanger the anonymity of the complainant, he can't be identified. But while naming and shaming an accused in an assault case is par for the course in most jurisdictions, there's a simmering debate elsewhere on the need to maintain anonymity of the accused in these cases. I want to point something out. They bring up a really good point. Think about the victim. If the victim wants to remain anonymous, that can be a really, really good thing for victims. They don't want people knowing about what happened to them. If the accused is made public, it's bad for the victim too. So perhaps the best thing we can do, not just in these areas, in any areas, is anonymity. You have a right to confront your accuser. But does that mean there's a right for people to blast their image of the victim or the accused? Maybe not. It's an interesting point. They say, India may well be ripe for such debate, says activists and lawyers. Early this year, the acquittal of two rugby players in a high-profile trial in Belfast prompted both academics and parliamentarians to enter the debate in support of the Irish law on anonymity of defendants and complainants in these trials. 5 years ago, England, too, was in throes of a heated public discussion on the need to bring in a law not to name the accused until conviction. No such law, however, emerged. But after the Belfast trials ended with a clean chit to the rugby players, a member of Parliament in Northern Ireland raised the demand once again to seek same right of anonymity to the accused that a complainant has. BBC reported almost 3 decades ago, Harvard law professors had advocated non-naming of accused on mere accusations. But again, I think this should extend to all crimes. But maybe I'm wrong. Look, let's point out there's nuance, okay? Not every crime is the same thing. It's not black and white. There are differences between, even in specific crimes, there's degrees, right? First degree, second degree, third, there's class A, there's class B, etc. Misdemeanor, felony. It's not all just one crime or nothing. Should we extend anonymity to every facet? Should it only be in this area? I don't know, but I think it's a really interesting point being brought up. Let's read on. In India now, civil rights activists agree that restraint should be exercised against naming the accused before at least a charge sheet, say some, until conviction, say others. Given the rise in the number of cases where the complainant seeks to drop charges after saying it was consensual or the promise of marriage is fulfilled, it is increasingly clear that a change to the law is required for cases to protect the name of the accused till he is convicted. Till they are convicted, women can do this too, said former Bombay HC Justice VM Kanade, adding, I believe there should be some law, but a distinction has to be made between a case filed after a relationship has ended and one where it is a clear case of violence or force. So there's more. Names of the accused in certain cases filed need to be made not public till investigation is complete and charge sheet is filed. There is stigma associated with such cases, But a false accusation can also stigmatize an accused in society, said Flavia Agnes, leading women's activist who started Majlis, Indian. Sorry if I can't pronounce it properly. This is necessary because even an accused has a right to privacy and a fair, not public trial. I completely agree. While Irish law of automatic anonymity for the accused, some campaigners of the rights of the victims argue against granting such anonymity, arguing that naming an accused empowers other victims to come forward. I don't necessarily agree, because if the victim wants to remain anonymous, then you can't name the accused, and who gets the right to name who? If basically, I guess the point is, if the victim knows the perpetrator, then and that's most cases, then it'll be really easy to identify the victim in the case. But there is another story from the India Times bringing up the issue just the other day. Amit Deshpande, gender equality activist, says we need a movement like MenToo because crime has no gender. I agree, but I also think it's fair to point out statistics that men are more likely to be the victim of and the perpetrator of many different crimes. Take that for what you want. That's just what we see in the numbers, right? And so a lot of people say that's, transphobic or it's sexist or whatever. It's like, look, man, I don't know. There's a lot of things behind a lot of things, but let's see what's going on with this other article. So there's this image here. I'm not sure what it is, but it says MenToo is as important as Me Too. Let me address that and say, I don't know if it's ever, I don't know how you quantify which is more important or not as important. But if you have someone who is a man advocating for a male issue, then I believe they should have a right to do that. And if you have a woman advocating for a female issue, they have a right to do that. And just because both sides are advocating against issues affecting them doesn't mean they oppose each other. And I actually think, considering the nature of these stories, it was actually really important for men's rights activists to actually work with feminists, masculists and feminists, because they actually agree on a lot of things, but are focused on their personal, issues, right? One of the big problems I've seen is that a lot of what mainstream feminism pushes, it kind of diminishes masculinity or men's issues. And that's illegitimate in my opinion. You should be able, as a woman, to point out, hey, this thing is bad, and it's discrimination against women. And a men's rights activist should be like, wow, you're right. That is gender discrimination, and we should help with that. Hey, have you noticed I have this issue in this area? And they can both be like, hey, maybe if we work together, we can solve problems together. Unfortunately, people like the other. Mainstream feminists blame the patriarchy. Now, they try and tone things down and say it doesn't mean individual men, but you have to understand that still reflects negatively on an individual man when they're told they're toxic or part of the system. Not, especially if they don't feel that way. Men are more likely to be homeless, more likely to die on the job. Men aren't going to feel like they're in charge when those things are true. So people need to, come together and try and figure out these problems. They say there are regular stories in the media of gangs extorting money from innocent men with the threat of false accusations. Salman, an IT consultant, had consensual intercourse with his girlfriend and he wanted to marry her. He has submitted proof of her consent and his willingness to marry her. They both got engaged in the presence of friends. Although her family was yet to agree to the marriage, eventually, his girlfriend refused. They broke up. But suddenly, after a year, she barged into his office saying she is pregnant and wanted him to marry her. Upon his refusal, she filed an accusation against him. Within a couple days, citing intercourse under false promise of marriage. Wow, I wonder if that would be illegal in the U.S. Coercive, maybe? She also filed a case of assault against his cancer-stricken sister, and another case against his father, who spent a week in jail. Jeez. So let me stress one thing, too, about India. Most of the news we hear about India is not about men being falsely accused. It's about the nightmarishly horrifying problem of men attacking women in India. Let's make that really clear. India's got some serious problems. But I want to stress, in terms of rights, just because, two things can be true at the same time. It is absolutely true there's a problem with men, hurting women. And it's absolutely true that some innocent men are targeted by vindictive, evil women. Should we ignore one problem because two problems exist? No. We can certainly allocate on both problems, and we can try and figure out a triage system which one needs to be addressed first. It doesn't mean we ignore the other one. It's always been weird to me that because of stories like this, you have people who say, if a men's rights activist is advocating for a men's rights issue, he's clearly opposed to feminists. Oh, well, hold on, man. Just because they're focusing on their issues doesn't mean you should deride them or assume the worst. What is that, why is that the issue? Why does everyone think that certain, I'll take that back. It's not everybody. It's typically this like progressive, regressive, whatever you want to call it, where they're like, you can't be sexist towards men or racist towards white people, instead of being like, everybody experiences unique problems, and we should figure out which problems we can solve together, and then move, into solving these problems. I'm not going to read too much into the second story, though, because I think it's mostly the same thing, so we'll just leave it there. Basically, I find it interesting that you have men in India, of all places, bring up this idea of a MenToo movement. It's not the first time it's been called for, but I thought it would be interesting to read about, considering it's been brought up several times, and I found it on Reddit, so I thought it was interesting. There was a lot of the comments in the news section were fairly negative towards it, so it is what it is. Let me know what you think in the comments. We'll leave it there. Again, you can support my work by going to timcast.com/donate. I will see you all, for those listening to the podcast, one more segment, but for everybody else, I'll see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. on this channel.